Are we building back better? That's the question a group of international climate experts asked on Wednesday at a UN-hosted conference. A crisis like the pandemic presents an opportunity for changing priorities. Let's take a look at how different countries say they plan to stage a green recovery. Well, in the recent budget, the UK pledged more cash for low-carbon projects and announced a new green savings bond scheme. Prime Minister Boris Johnson had previously outlined a plan to create green jobs. The European Union earmarked 37% of its recovery fund for spending on climate measures. There are plans to help countries like Poland, whose economy is reliant on coal, to help them transition to greener energy. And of course, as the world's biggest polluters, all eyes are on China and the United States to see what path they will chart. President Joe Biden's stimulus plan contains promises to support green jobs, but a full economic recovery plan will be made clear later in the year. Last year, China pledged that its CO2 emissions will peak by 2030 and say it will soon release full details on how this is going to be achieved. But of course, words are very different to actions. To talk more about whether all these pledges are likely to happen, we can speak to Brian O'Callaghan, who's lead researcher at the Oxford University Economic Recovery Project. Thanks ever so much for joining us. So, building back better, who is walking the walk as well as talking the talk?
Wonderful. Thank you for that introduction, and it's great to be with you this afternoon. Yes, so our project, Oxford University, in partnership with the United Nations and the IMF, as well as GIZ from Germany, has been looking to understand which countries are building back better and which are still falling short. So far, we see that of recovery spending is that which is intended to reinvigorate an economy. 18% has been directed to green initiatives. Now, there's pretty significant deviation between countries. You have some like Denmark up near 60%, whereas others like Australia down near 2%. So quite a bit of deviation, overall 18% or so.
I want to talk about that 18%. I mean, that seems quite low. I appreciate it's an average. What is holding governments back?
Right, and it is rather confounding. What has been demonstrated over the past year in various academic circles is that the idea that green spending is bad for the economy is just complete rubbish, to be honest. Academic work has demonstrated that you can spend on green initiatives that match and in many cases actually exceed the economic impacts of traditional and especially dirty alternatives. So there's a real economic impetus for this green spending, even if you don't believe in climate change, it just seems to make economic sense. Then there are also the various social benefits that can come from green spending and, of course, the environmental benefits. So it's the question, why aren't we seeing governments do as much as they should be? A lot of it comes down to transparency. Governments are doing a really good job of bringing attention to their green programs, but not necessarily putting them in context with their other programs. So the Global Recovery Observatory, which is launched today, allows taxpayers around the world to understand really just how much is going to green projects and how much isn't.
So that they can do the numbers. So look, you're saying it makes business sense, you're saying it makes social sense. So to keep things sustainable and equitable, what would your checklist be?
Right. So we have developed a rather robust 100-page methodology designed to help governments understand what type of initiatives do have positive environmental characteristics. And then on the social side, the devil is really in the detail. A policy, say, for example, a green home retrofit policy, of which the UK has recently introduced one, that can have very positive social impacts if directed towards low-income households. However, if those types of direction and incentive aren't there, it can actually support the status quo of high inequality. Because, of course, in the case of a home efficiency retrofit, those who have a lot of money already are going to be more likely to have their new retrofit, on the cards and ready to go. So on the environmental side, we have a detailed methodology to help governments understand. Really, you're looking for projects that reduce future greenhouse gas emissions. Of course, in the short term, infrastructure projects often have negative greenhouse gas emissions, even the green ones. But in the long term, what you're talking about is substituting dirty energy projects like coal and gas with clean alternatives. And in that way, you can reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the long term. So then there's also biodiversity impacts and air pollution impacts, which we also try to target. And in particular, in China, for the Chinese audience, the air pollution impacts are really a central part of the discussion.
So a very long checklist. Well, Brian Callaghan, thank you very much for giving us some pointers on what governments could do to be cleaner and greener. Thank you.